and welcome to the Media Club podcast. Last month, we discussed our thoughts on college tuition, and today we'll be discussing our thoughts on API month and the Asian American experience in the US. Before we begin with today's topic, we are going to introduce our speakers by mentioning our name, grade, school, and answering the question, what is your favorite Asian cuisine? I'm Joseph Kim. I am a freshman going to Cypress High School, and my favorite Asian cuisine would be Korean food, specifically Korean barbecue. Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a junior at St. High School, and I would say my favorite Asian cuisine is sushi.
Connor?
I'm Connor. I'm 10th grade and I go to Troy High School and I like sushi as well.
Sean?
Hi, my name is Chana and I'm a junior from Cypress High School, and my favorite Asian cuisine is anything that's Korean. And also I have to leave in like 10 minutes, so I apologize in advance.
Yeah, that's fine. We can make it work. Sean?
I'm Sean. 10th grade, joined at Troy High School, and my favorite Asian cuisine would be Vietnamese food.
Kyle?
Hi, I'm Kyle Min. I am a junior at Los Alamitos High School. My favorite Asian cuisine is ramyeon or ramen.
Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm a junior at Hanalani Schools, and I don't know if this counts as cuisine, but I like mochi.
Victoria?
My name is Victoria and I'm a junior at Troy High School, and I love Korean food.
And Ethan?
Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm a freshman at Canyon High School, and I think Korean food's just really good.
So let's get into our questions. So what do you think API month is all about? This question is open to everyone, so if you have any opinions, just feel free to respond.
I think that AAPI month is about recognizing the influences of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in America.
I believe it's a form of like giving Asian Americans a representation.
I believe that AAPI month is all about bringing in Asian culture and showing people that that it's still a prevalent culture, and you shouldn't like just forget it because we're kind of like the minority. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think there's like a consensus that we have a good understanding that it's just to pay homage to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Let's move on. So do you think that this month is important or necessary, Chana?
Yeah, I do think it's important. Only because, or not only because, but like mostly because it's just like a special time that's kind of set aside to make sure that, you know, the contributions that AAPI or members of the AAPI community have made to America are recognized and celebrated.
Victoria, how has API awareness affected us as Asians?
I think it's just important because it educates everyone about the AAPI community and brings awareness, especially amidst all of the rising hate that we've seen in the pandemic. And it helps us bring everyone together and find ways to support each other.
Do you have any like personal experiences in which API awareness has helped you out?
I think it's mainly just educating myself, like finding Asian American and Pacific Islander like businesses that I can support.
Right. And so Morgan Freeman, a renowned Black actor, when asked about Black History Month, he described it as quote unquote ridiculous. And he says, you're going to relegate my history to a month. Do you think the same could be said for API month? And do you agree with the statement, Julie?
So I definitely understand where he stands and where he's coming from. he mentioned that there's no White History Month, so what makes Black History Month different? And I understand how he can interpret that month or that celebration as something that entails that Black people are worthless or something that they are doing are not as important as white people or what they're doing, and that's why we need that month. But in my opinion, I disagree with his statement because it's not ourselves that have put ourselves in that position, and so we've created those months to equalize yourself with the majority of people wherever you may be, because white people are not the majority everywhere, but in America they are. And so I feel as though having celebration months for minorities is important and does not relegate those races, but instead offer them a platform where they can equalize themselves with the accomplishments of the majority.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are like two really unique sides to this. There is the side that like treating minorities and having their culture specifically assigned to a month might make them seem like they're getting special treatment, and they might seem like, oh, we're getting ostracized, or I don't want like this special treatment, you're treating us differently. But also I think it's really important to recognize that minorities such as like the Asian community haven't been treated the same, and so because of that there is a equalizing factor. And so, Connor, in what ways do you think that immigrants have contributed to American culture, and specifically like Asian immigrants?
I feel like just in general, they like contributed a lot to like the arts and like just the general culture. I think top ones are like the new technology, the customs, and like the question that we asked earlier, the cuisine. I think those are just really important ones that just came out, and then they also helped a lot in like the science and academic institutions. I feel like without the Asian immigrants, we'd just be really far behind.
Right, and I think that's a really good perspective. What are the consequences of not being considered quote unquote American despite being a citizen, Ethan?
A consequence of not being considered American in America, even as a citizen, is being unjustly discriminated for not being white and experiencing racism every once in a while. And sometimes that's more, you experience more racism depending on where you live. And in recent years, Asian hate crimes have gone up 150% in 2020 because of the coronavirus.
Right, and we see like these alarming statistics, we see all these numbers, and so do you personally like feel that people don't consider you quote unquote American, or do you see less of that in your life?
Well, now that we're all stuck at home, I see less of that. But when I was in school, there's definitely people who did say racial slurs and kind of, yeah, they discriminate against Asian people because we're the minority here.
Yeah. Okay. How do you think the above attitudes help justify certain oppressive actions, such as Executive Order 9066? That was the order that basically put the Japanese in internment camps in World War II. What do you think about this, Kyle?
So I believe because of how like people treat individuals insensitively, it leads them to kind of forget that those people are humans. So then when they do those kind of actions like Executive Order 9066, they don't think for a second that those people are people just like them who have lives just like them. So this leads to a lot of, I guess, crimes because people often forget that those people are human.
Just another follow-up question. Do you think that the way Asians would be treated would be different? Specifically, like, do you think, for example, the Japanese wouldn't be put in internment camps in World War II if many people considered them quote unquote American?
Yeah, I believe that like if we treated each other as Americans as such, we would see them as like kind of like us. So we wouldn't kind of look at them in the sense of they're just other people rather than like they're our people.
Yeah, definitely. And so basically, let's talk about the model minority myth. Sean, how and why did the model minority myth develop? And could you like just go into what that is?
All right.
For
So by definition, I think that the minority group is basically people who are fewer in numbers in the main group. So like in the US, like white people are the majority, right? So that makes all the blacks, Hispanics, and Asians the minority. So like now in Asians, we're disadvantaged because we are the minority, but some of the Asians we were able to like find success in America, even though we're the minority. So this made like everyone believe that American Asians are the ideal minority. So because of that, the stereotype that Asians work hard, do well in school, and go on to have successful careers, like that all began because of that. So now people believe that like Asian minorities shouldn't be treated as a minority because they're already doing so well. So like I don't think this is the right way of thinking because that myth actually overlooks the fact that the Asian we're like all still diverse, and although in a group that we might actually be successful, like some people like they're still having trouble. So like you shouldn't just like be like, oh, they don't get like the help that other minority groups get because they're already so successful, they don't deserve it. So yeah.
Yeah, and just to give the audience some context, the model minority myth is basically, it basically originated from policies of immigration that happened in the 1800s, 1900s that basically specifically chose Asian immigrants that were successful. So they were educated, they had lots of money, they were successful, etc. And they let them into the US. And then after they were let into the US, the government kind of pointed to them, and many scholars and many academics pointed to Asians, and they told other minorities, look, you can succeed. These Asians are succeeding. What's holding you guys back, right? It's not that there's any racism or anything. And so this has kind of been weaponized against other minorities. How do you see this, Sean? How do you specifically see like this weaponization hurting other people?
Well, it's not fair because the government if they brought in like the best of the best Asians to America, then the other people, other minorities were brought in because their own they wanted to come. So it's not like fair to like compare, like it's comparing like every casual player like in a game to like everyone who wants to play competitively. Like there's a different level there. Like the best of the best against like normal people. That's not fair. So you shouldn't like judge people and be like you should be like them even though like they're best of the best. So yeah.
Right. It's definitely like an unfair standard to compare like a fabricated type of class of successful people to people who just got into the country. Now for Ryan, Asian Americans are often stereotyped as having achieved a higher level of success than other minority groups, like we mentioned. How is this thinking problematic?
Um, this kind of thinking is definitely problematic because it creates certain boundaries as well as expectations for us as individuals and a minority and a group. Um, it kind of and all that kind of expectation also kind of downplays our experiences as a minority in this country. So, as all of us are Asian, I'm sure, being that minority entails all of the like racism or slurs that we've experienced. So that kind of expectation and like model minority type of mindset, it downplays a lot of that. And also kind of like having Asian Americans stereotyped as having higher success, it makes things such as college admissions really hard for us. I'm sure, as all of us are Asian students going up into college, we've all either heard of or experienced, difficulties because, things such as affirmative action, which, in theory should help minorities, is actually, causing colleges to want to accept less Asians as uh, this country's like progressing further and further. Colleges kind of want to show off and boast diversity, but then with that kind of mindset, it's super hypocritical because we're still minorities, and then suddenly if they accept like a whole bunch of Asians because their performance is should get them into that college, it's kind of problematic. So yeah.
Yeah, and just another follow-up question. You kind of talked about how it affects other minority groups too. Do you think like the stereotype that like, oh, Asians are smart kind of contrasts with other stereotypes such as like, oh, like blondies aren't smart? And do you think that kind of contrast makes it worse that, oh, we need one group to be smart and another group they could just like fall behind and they're expected to be behind? Do you think that contrast is actually um, worsened because of the stereotype?
Sorry, I'm not sure I really understand. Can you kind of
So basically, like, do you think that like because we have the stereotype like that we're all smart, we're gonna get good grades, do you think that the expectation for other minorities are kind of lowered and that they get to basically pass and they're expected to not know as much or not be um as academically like good as us Asians?
yeah, I think there definitely are like those stereotypes set in place. And that contrast does make things difficult for both sides. So for example, for us, since, since we're like model minority, we're expected to do more uh, and kind of honestly have to do more to get to the same places as other minorities. And on the other hand, because Asians are kind of set as the model minority, they're kind of unfairly treated as like not as successful or not as driven to be successful. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your perspective. We're just gonna move on to questions. These are open to everyone, and so if you have any ideas, yeah, feel free to jump in. Do you think being a quote unquote good American and Americanizing as much as possible ultimately helps one to be more accepted by American society? Why or why not?
Well, in my like personal experience, I'm saying I think that if you're like trying to Americanize yourself and be a good American, quote unquote, it didn't really help me out to be accepted by American society because most of my life people didn't really care that I was Asian. Like they accepted me who I was, even if I was Asian with all the Asian culture. Like if I was trying to become more American, like they didn't really say anything. If I was less American, they didn't say anything. So it was more or less like they didn't really care. I would say that.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it kind of depends on what you mean by like becoming a good American. You can kind of interpret it as, you know, disregarding your own culture and kind of trying to fit in and be like that, stereotypical, super patriotic, like United States flag everywhere type of person. Or if you're kind of thinking about it as, America as a hot pot of cultures and kind of helping the country progress. I think that type of becoming American is definitely helpful to American society and ourselves. Um, but I don't think you should try to like change your identity or your um, ethnic culture based on just where you live.
Yeah, definitely. Like there are, yeah, like you said, there are definitely like a lot of different experiences. Some Asians need to kind of like throw away their culture just to be American. Others kind of like compound it. So they say, oh, I'm, for example, Korean American. And so they say, I'm proud to be both. Yeah, and so it's really unique and it's really multifaceted, this problem. How does your family celebrate your cultural background?
Um, so we do a lot of different cultural Korean stuff. Like we do eat a lot of like Korean food and whatnot. But like more importantly, like during New Year's, we would always like it's called sehe. Basically, we would pay our respects to the elders, and in exchange, they would give us money, I guess, kind of like as compensation. But it's kind of like our way of kind of asserting our own culture. There's a bunch more, but I can't really think of them. But like we do like try to grab historical cultural heritages, like traditions that we do, and we do them.
This isn't really a celebration of like historical, like traditional culture, but I think it's the small things like when I go to my friend's house or something, my mom will always say, like, oh, take something like fruits or food to give to the family. Or when like my friends come over, she'll serve like cut up fruits. And I think it's just that things that are common in Asian households, um, that's kind of what we do in everyday life. And that's kind of what upholds our culture instead of like, but not only big events, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Like everything, big events, small events, just everything is like part of our culture. And yeah, and I think it's like all part of being Asian. So were you always proud of being Asian? And what is it like, what's your experience growing up as an Asian American?
Yeah, I can definitely say that, I'm like proud to be Asian and, Korean. I feel like any type of like Korean related news or events, that type of stuff, you always just kind of see myself being proud of that type of stuff. But also like my experience as an Asian American, I'm sure we all can kind of agree since we all kind of live in this like SoCal bubble that's predominantly Asian. We go to um, we can't really like fully experience that sort of like minority type of life. We've all had, uh, obviously, there's like racial slurs here and there and being discriminated against, like in general, but that type of like severe like disconnection from where you live just because you're like maybe like the only Asian in your school or something like that. Because we're lucky enough not to experience that, I think my whole experience growing up as an Asian American has been like pretty normal, pretty like comparable to any other American. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like what you said that being in like this SoCal bubble kind of really helps us a lot in terms of like not being exposed to as much racism. Yeah. Yeah, we talked about like a lot of heavy topics today, and so let's just end off on like a good note. And so can everyone just say one thing that you're proud of from your culture or that you've come to really enjoy? We can start with Connor.
Uh, hmm, I feel like I really like the Korean, like their kind of determination, I guess. If that makes sense. Like, even if we fall behind, like it's kind of cliche, but like we still find a way to like just push through and like get to the end.
Kyle.
Um, I'm really proud about the culture of kind of like perseverance, even through all that, like all of the efforts to undermine a lot of our Asian culture. It's still there, standing strong, regardless of whatever people try to do to take it down.
Ethan. Ethan, do you have anything that you're proud of like your culture? Oh, okay, that's fine. Then let's just move on to Sean. Do you have anything specifically?
Well, I one part of my culture that I really enjoyed was unlike usual because I know that a lot of American parents that they set something kind of like curfew at like 9 p.m. Like you should probably go sleep then. But what I'm thankful is that my parents as long as I have to do something like productive or like I want to stay up as long as I want they let me do that because I'm pretty sure in my culture they don't really you're not supposed to, you can like go as long as you want, like as late, as long as you're like studying or doing something productive, I guess. So yeah.
Victoria, do you have anything?
I guess just like the values of like hard work and like just persevering through everything. And I also love like the celebrations that we have during New Year's and like Korean Thanksgiving.
Julie.
Kind of like what just Sean and Victoria said, I really admire the work ethic aspect of the culture. Like Sean said, my mom doesn't really care how long I stay up as long as I'm doing something that helps me. And I feel like that places it places importance on, doing your best. And even if you're not as good as someone else, that doesn't matter as long as you put in all your effort and you're trying to help yourself or others.
And last but not least, Ryan.
I enjoy just, like the food, I guess. Simple things like that, As a Korean, I get to eat a lot of good food, so.
Yeah. To our audience, thank you for tuning in. This month we talked about API month, and because it's May, come back next month and we will have another podcast for you. And that is it.